Hello fellow sim racers. Here we are again, build 4 of Assetto Corsa Competizione. This time bringing us the Ferrari 488 GT3, Hungaroring and a whole host of other tweaks. Today's video is all about the Ferrari, which is a staple of GT3 grids in pretty much every series in the world, and was well represented through both the Blancpain Endurance and Sprint Cups this year. Ferrari have always been masters at combining image and performance, and the 488 GT3 is no different. Compared to the Bruiser Bentley and the highly functional BMW of recent Assetto Corsa Competizione releases, the Fezza does have a certain air of refinement about it. And while I'm talking about aesthetics, it's probably worth pointing out that once again Kunos have produced an absolutely stunning vehicle. Sure, it looks good from the outside, but when you take the replay camera inside the car, it's hard not to be impressed by the quality of the modelling. Something I've only just noticed in this build is the quality of the driver animations, and in particular, your little animated feet operating the pedals. Arguably not the most important aspect of the sim, but indicative of the approach that Kunos have taken to try and find improvements in every area. But you're probably not here to listen to me talk about how this car looks, so let's talk driving. When Build 3 was released last month, I was impressed by just how different the BMW felt to the Bentley, despite their similar layouts. And with that in mind, I was keen to see how this mid-engine, rear-wheel drive racing machine based on an Italian supercar would compare to the outwardly similar Lamborghini Huracan that was launched in Build 1. For me, the Lambo and BMW were slow burners, cars that took a little while to understand and ultimately appreciate, while the Bentley was an instant hit. And I'm happy to say that the Ferrari made an impact right from the off. There's a lot to like about how the Ferrari drives. It's absolutely brilliant on the brakes, and it eats curbs for breakfast, something that's particularly important at a track like Hungaroring. That being said, even the stock aggressive setup has a fair lick of turn-in understeer. The good news though is that softening the front anti-roll bar by a few clicks was a pretty instant solution. Once the front end was biting a bit more, the underlying handling characteristics of the car started to show themselves. The Ferrari is a pretty forgiving drive. If you push the car past the limit into a slide, you have plenty of time to correct, unlike the diva-like Huracan. This makes it possible to drive the 488 with a bit more flair than the other Italian offering, should you wish. The combination of fantastic brakes and forgiving mid-corner handling allows you to brake hard and trail brake deep into corners without the worry that you'll upset the rear too much and end up facing the wrong way. And when it all starts to come together, it's pretty rewarding. On a side note, improvements to the tyre model do seem to have made the Huracan a much more responsive car, at least based on the few laps I ran last night. In fact, if you weren't a fan of the way the Huracan drove, then I think it's definitely worth going back and giving it some more time in this build. Now, back to the Ferrari. Being a GT3 car, it does rely on traction control as part of its core philosophy. And interestingly, the 488 has two traction control settings, labelled TC1 and TC2 on the dash display. From my understanding, TC1 controls the point at which traction control intervenes, and TC2 allows you to adjust the amount of torque reduction that's applied. I haven't had a lot of time to play with this yet, but I can definitely see the value in being able to adjust these two parameters independently. As a heads up, TC1's adjusted using the buttons you've got mapped to your traction control, while TC2 is linked to the traction control cut function. As a final note on the driving behaviour of the 488, it must be said that this is a car that feels very racy. Hungaroring is pretty much the poster child for overtaking difficulty, but the Ferrari is the kind of car that encourages you to make courageous overtaking moves. With its trustworthy and efficient brakes and forgiving handling, the car almost bullies you into making the sort of dan-dare moves that make you feel like an absolute superhero. This feels great in single player, but may make you unpopular online. Moving away from how the 488 handles for a moment, and a word about audio. Assetto Corsa Competizione has made big strides forward from its predecessor in almost every area, but for me the biggest improvement across the board is sound. As with the Lambo, the M6 and the Bentley, Kunos have really nailed the onboard sound of the Ferrari. But it's not so much the engine note that impresses, though it is largely indistinguishable from the real car. No, it's the symphony of extraneous noises from secondary systems combined with environmental noises that makes the onboard environment particularly convincing. And of all the things to be impressed by, bizarrely it's the convincing wind noise that really got me this time around. So, from my perspective, another build, another hit, and more importantly, another car that has its own distinct feel, separate from that of the other cars in ACC. I must admit that while I'm a fan of the real car, I wasn't excitedly anticipating the 488's release like a kid on Christmas morning. No, for me the next two builds are much more interesting, with the Emil Frey Jag and the Honda NSX. But I can see the 488 becoming my go-to car for sprint races because of the enthusiastic style of racing that it encourages. At this stage, Assetto Corsa Competizione is really starting to take shape, and in my opinion at least, the quality of the content that's already been delivered is outstanding. With each new build, I'm noticing incremental improvements in the game's handling and visuals in particular, and at least on my setup, I seem to be having a bit more GPU headroom these days. Yes, there are still bugs, and there's still plenty of room to make optimization gains in the future, especially in VR. But for me, there's a lot to be excited about. I know I've said it before, and really at this stage it's becoming a bit of a cliche, but I really can't wait for the next build to see how the title develops. So that about wraps things up here. In my next video, I'll be taking a look at the good and bad weather suite for Assetto Corsa, which is, in my opinion at least, an absolute must-have mod. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then it would be great if you could hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And if you think the video will be helpful for others, then please consider sharing it. As always, thank you for donating your precious free time by watching. It is very much appreciated. So all that's left to say is goodbye, thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.